On this episode of the Budding Watch Enthusiast, I'm reviewing the Straton Syncro. Alright guys, so let's do a quick overview here of the Straton Syncro because I have a lot to say about this watch. I want to start with measurements because it is a big watch, or at least the model that I have is kind of large. So we have a 44 millimeter width here. Lug to lug, you're looking at about 50 millimeters. The height of the watch is 15 millimeters, so incredibly tall. And then the lug width is 22 millimeters. Now, this watch does also come in a 40 millimeter width variant, which of course makes the rest of the case dimensions slightly smaller. Still very tall though. It's tall because of the movement and because of the bezel that we see here. So even though because of the width it does wear, or well, I shouldn't say because of the width, because of the lug to lug length, it does wear a little bit smaller than the width would suggest. I found that this kind of wears like a 42, but it is super tall, so that is something to keep in mind if you're picking up this watch. The dial, we see this blue sunburst dial. The sunburst doesn't really shine through like you see with other dials like it, just because the dial is so busy. It does have a lot going on, but you can definitely see that the effect is there. You do see that we have applied markers at the hour marks. These are stainless steel markers that have luminoma in them as well. You see the date window down there at the bottom is also framed in steel. It's very nice. It keeps with the overall aesthetic of the hour markers. If we zoom in, you can see that the second indices are broken down to 1/5 seconds. That is for the chronograph specifically. You do have the blade style hands that have luminoma in them as well. You see the tachymeter chapter ring that goes around the inside of the dial. But of course the main feature, the main event here is these framed subdials. The left dial is the minute markers for the chronograph feature, and the right dial is a 24-hour complication. There is no running seconds on this chronograph, which I thought I would mind, but I actually don't mind too much. I'll talk about it more when we get to the review portion. Of course, those have orange hands. You see the orange chronograph hand as well. If we zoom in a little bit on the subdial, the chronograph subdial, you see that it does have a sunray pattern. Each of those lines is basically every two. Trying to get the camera focused. Every line is 2 minutes. You see bolded lines for 10, 30, and 50 minutes, so that you can easily tell those pretty easily. So that is the dial. If we go outside of the dial, we get to the fact that it has a domed sapphire crystal with some beautiful distortion if you tilt it around that way. But you can't really see the dome in the crystal because it does sort of sit flat with this bezel that we have on this watch. This is a dive time bezel. It does have, it's 120 clicks, it's unidirectional, turns very easily and very satisfyingly. It does have a little bit more play than I care for with my bezels, but that's okay. It's certainly not a deal breaker. It does have this machined edging along the side. What's really unique about this, there are two things though. The first thing, which I really love because it really fits the driving theme of the watch, is you see that the bezel insert having the 10, 20, basically every 10-minute markers around the outside, but also besides that you get this checkered flag aesthetic, which these also double as second markers as well. It's hard to see when we're zoomed out, but if we bring it in a little bit, you can see how between each second is 4 lines. Basically, those are also broken down into 1/5 seconds, which again fits with the overall theme of the watch. And then the insert is covered. I'm not sure what the coating is. I think it might be the same sapphire crystal that you find on the watch, because that's there to protect it. So not an aluminum insert, not a ceramic insert, but a glass covered insert, which is very, very cool. Gives it a unique feel, makes it very durable. I really dig that quite a bit. If we go to the case has a fully brushed steel finish, with the exception of these polished beveled edges that go up the side of the case. And then, of course, the pushers for the chronograph and the crown is also in polished steel. If we flip the crown over, you can see that it is signed with the same Straton logo that you also see at the 12 o'clock position on the watch dial. And it also has the same machine style edging as the bezel does. If we flip the watch over, we do have a decorated case back. This is pretty common of all the models from Straton Watch Company, and it has all the relevant information back there as well. So the main feature of this watch, the main thing I really want to talk about was this, the movement that's inside of this. So the Straton Syncro, it has the VK64 Mecha Quartz movement, which is a chronograph movement from Seiko. And Seiko developed this movement as kind of a way to get the feel of a mechanical chronograph complication, but for a much cheaper price than they normally are, because the watch itself is quartz. It's got a quartz movement. The main timekeeping movement of the watch is battery powered. It is quartz. You notice, I remember I said there's no running seconds hand on the VK64 movement. And that's something that I didn't think I would like, but I ended up appreciating as we went along. But the thing that makes it the mecha part of the Mecha Quartz is the fact that there's a module attached to the movement for the chronograph specifically, and it is a mechanical chronograph movement with hammers, levers, and the whole nine that you'd expect to find. So why does that matter? Well, when you start the chronograph, first of all, you get the same big, I'll see if I can try this again real quick, see if you guys can hear it. You get that very satisfying click when you start the chronograph movement, and if you watch the chronograph seconds hand sweep around the watch, it's a smooth sweeping motion like you'd find with an automatic. It's actually moving 5 times per second, so this chronograph can be used to time within 1/5 seconds. And then the other thing, if you stop the chronograph feature, when we reset it, much like a mechanical chronograph would, it has the flyback feature so that it instantly goes back to the neutral position. It doesn't have to wind itself back like you normally would see with a quartz chronograph watch. I've got a lot to say about the movement. Like I said, the movement is arguably the biggest feature of the watch, and I think it's actually really cool. Before I move on to the accessories, let me first put in a Loom Shot, which you guys can see right here. And of course, as is customary, I also put in the Loom Shot of this watch compared with the Seiko SKX, which for my money has the best loom in the market. And if you notice, you can actually see it here if I hold the watch up too. The numerals on the dive time bezel are illuminated, as are, of course, the hour markers and the hands on the watch itself. It's pretty good. Like I said, I would expect it to be for a watch that advertised itself as a dive watch. And oh, by the way, like I said, this is also a dive watch in addition to a chronograph. It does have 200 meter water resistance. It does have a screw down crown. Being a quartz movement, of course, if we pull the crown all the way out, it is hacking. You can't really see that because there's no running seconds. And of course, if we pull the crown out to the first position, you can see that there is a quick date adjustment window as well. So the Syncro has actually 5 different variations in terms of color and style that you can get from Straton, and each of those variations comes with a different strap. This happens to be the strap that came with this version of the watch, and I really do enjoy this strap. It is a dark blue racing strap with orange stitching, matches the color of the watch perfectly. If we flip it over, we do see that it has an orange backing. It is a leather strap. It's very good. It's a very comfortable strap. It's also long enough to fit my 8-inch wrist, which I absolutely appreciate. As we've talked about before, sometimes the larger wristed of us have a harder time with the factory straps. This one is excellent. It does come with a signed buckle that is done in the same brushed steel finish as the case is. And yeah, like I said, I really like this strap. It is excellent. That's not all you get, though, with this package. It does come in this very nice faux leather case that not only holds the watch when you get it in the little area. Let me open this up real quick. In the little area down here where the watch came, but it also comes with 2 NATO straps and a spring bar tool as well. So some nice extras you get there. The NATO straps are of excellent quality. I've used them both. They're very, very good. There's actually 11 different colors and styles to choose from with Straton. You get to pick whichever 2 you want. These are the 2 that I chose. They are also signed on the buckle as well, if you take a look at those. And then I also opted for the mesh bracelet that Straton sells as well. Now, depending on which model of the Syncro you get, it might actually come on this strap. I believe the silver and blue model comes on a mesh bracelet. This is a great mesh bracelet, though. I actually bought a mesh bracelet from another company earlier this year, and it's good, and I enjoy it, but it is not as comfortable as this one from Straton is. Of course, the sign, it does have a fold-over securing clasp as well, but yeah, just super comfortable. I bought this because I think it will also work well with my Seiko SKX, so I figured kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But yeah, it's a great looking bracelet. It feels great. It's incredibly comfortable. It does fit larger wrists. I mean, you can see I'm basically at the end here with my 8-inch wrist. But yeah, I really enjoy this bracelet. I think it's $40 extra to buy this. If your watch does not come with it, well worth the money for me. So before we take it back to the table, let me just give you guys a quick wrist shot of the Syncro. And here's the Straton Syncro on my 8-inch wrist. Like I said, the strap is very comfortable. The watch fits very well. It doesn't fit as wide as a 44mm watch normally does. And again, if you are smaller wristed, or if you just prefer the smaller size, they do have a 40mm option for you as well. So that is my overview of the Straton Syncro. Let's take it back to the desk where I can review this watch. All right, so that was the overview of the Straton Syncro. Let us get into the review portion. I always start with what I didn't like about the watch, and the first big dislike that I had with this watch is the legibility of the chronograph subdial. So the way it's laid out is a very stylistic choice, where you have these radiating like sun rays that come out from the dial, but that makes it hard to read at a glance, especially because it's a 60-minute register. But everything's kind of crammed together really tightly. I almost wish that this was a 30-minute chronograph register. It would have made it a little bit easier to read at a glance. Again, it's legible enough. Like if you stare at it for a couple seconds, you can parse it together. But I will say that if you are buying this watch to use the chronograph feature as a tool, I would actually recommend against it. I think there are watches that have much more legible chronograph minute subdials that if you need the tool portion of the watch, first and foremost, that's going to be the way you want to go. Again, I appreciate the stylistic choice. It definitely fits in with the aesthetic of the watch. But like I said, just because everything, you have all these lines and it's so cramped together, plus each line on here is every 2 minutes, not every 1 minute. So like I said, the odd numbered minutes fall in between the 2 lines. It's not easy to just look down and be able to tell where you're at with the chronograph feature. So that's my biggest sticking point with this watch. The second thing that I didn't care for with the Straton Syncro is that it is super, super tall. We talked about it in the measurements that it is 15 millimeters high. That is humongous. Now I understand why it is. It's because of the movement. It's because, you have this dive time bezel on here, but it's just so tall. And it looks even taller because of the way the bezel is in conjunction with the crystal. So take my Sal Baltimore that I've reviewed previously on the channel, and that's also a tall watch. It's like 14.5 millimeters, but it's not as tall. It doesn't appear as tall as it is because the height comes from the curve of the crystal. Well, of course, the Syncro has a curved crystal as well, but because you have that big, thick bezel that also comes up alongside the crystal, it just makes this thing look humongous. And that's okay. I mean, for the style of watch it is, it's not like you're gonna be wearing this with like a dress shirt or anything like that anyway, but that's gonna be a huge turnoff for some people. And then also the fact that it is the measurements, the horizontal and vertical measurements of the watch are a little bit more square, makes it appear that much taller because the rest of the watch doesn't appear as big as it actually is. So again, the height is going to be a huge turnoff for some folks. Minor thing, I'm not a huge fan of the hands on the watch. I think the blade style hands don't really fit the overall aesthetic the watch is going for. I would have preferred something like more of a baton style hand, something that was squared off. That's just a personal preference for me. And then the reason that I went back and forth, because I debated between this watch and another watch that Straton Watch Company makes, their curve model. And while I like the design of this watch much more, I think that the 24-hour, or I should say the second time zone complication that's on the Straton Curve is an infinitely more useful feature than the dive time bezel that comes on the Syncro. I kind of wish that they had made, this style watch, but with that second time zone bezel instead of the dive timer. The dive timer, it's unique, it's cool. There's not a ton of watches out there that are chronographs and diving watches simultaneously, so that makes it stand out, certainly. But again, the complication, not as useful as a second time zone feature, I feel. But that is it for dislikes. I'm gonna get right to the stuff that I love about this watch, because there is a ton of stuff that I love about this watch. This has been one of my favorite watches that I've had so far. The biggest thing is that it just looks awesome. It's such a bold looking watch, such a unique looking watch. I love the vintage stylings on this watch, the throwback to the 70s era chronograph. There's nothing out there that's quite like it. I mean, there are other, there are other vintage chronographs out there. Certainly, it's other watches that use the same movement as well, but they look more traditional, and that might be fine for some of you. I've said it before for the past couple videos, everyone should have a fun watch, like a conversation watch, that when people see, they want to know more about it. And for me, this is the first one of that style of watch that I have. This is just a phenomenal, bold design. I love the design. I love the colors. This comes in 5 different colors. There's tons of different options out there, but for me, the blue with the orange hands, that's it. That's the one that it's got to be, and I think it looks fantastic. The second thing is I love the VK64 Mecha Quartz movement. I never thought that I'd be so delighted by a movement, and a quartz movement also. Like, ever since I've discovered automatic watches, I haven't really given much thought to buying like a quartz analog watch, because automatics are so much cooler. But for this watch, it works really well. It's a great way to have an accurate timekeeping watch, but still have the features. Basically, it's a great way to get an automatic or a mechanical style chronograph for a very affordable price. And I thought that going into this, when I was reading about the movement and learning about it, that I would really hate not having a running seconds hand on the watch, which the VK64 does not feature. It doesn't have a running seconds, so you can't see that in the normal time functions of the watch. And I thought that would be a huge dislike when I first got this watch, but I actually have come to appreciate the fact that it doesn't have a running seconds hand, because the fact that it doesn't, I sometimes forget that I'm wearing a quartz watch. That's one of the really cool benefits to not having that seconds hand, where you see that hard tick as every second passes by, is I forget that it's a quartz watch sometimes, because with the smooth motion of the chronograph, and just like it's so satisfying, the click of the chronograph and the snapback as well. I love the Mecha Quartz movement. It's fantastic. I'm not going to run out and buy like a million watches that have that movement in it, but if you are looking for an affordable chronograph, finding a watch with a Seiko Mecha Quartz is a great deal to me. I feel like it's a fantastic movement that is, I want to say, kind of overlooked, because I had never heard of it before I started doing research into this watch. But it's phenomenal. It's one of my favorite aspects about the watch. The second thing is the strap compatibility. Obviously, you have to be wary about color, because the colors of the watch make it pair specifically with certain style straps, but the fact that it looks great on a rally strap, the fact that it looks excellent on the mesh bracelet like I have it on right here is great. And so I was really scared with the NATO strap for this one because NATOs, they tend to make the watches sit taller, and as I mentioned during the dislikes, this is already a really tall watch, but it's actually kind of genius how Straton designed this watch, because the lugs, the actual spring bar, sits a little bit lower than the bottom of the case back. So a NATO strap can actually pass through and doesn't really raise the height of the watch that much. That was a really cool feature to me, and I was like, wow, I'm really glad that they thought about that, because I really do feel like that was intentional in making sure that the NATO straps weren't going to make an already tall watch sit that much taller. I really appreciate that. And also, like, just the whole presentation that you get with this watch is fantastic. One of the things that I've loved in my short experience with micro brands so far is not only are you buying the watch, but you're also kind of buying the company. You get a very personal approach to this, I feel like, more so than you do with some of the bigger, some of the more common watch manufacturers. Obviously, like when I bought my Hamilton, for example, like it came in a nice box and the presentation was great, but I feel like Straton really went out of their way. Like being able to, coming in this nice, faux leather case that it comes in, providing a spring bar tool, providing two, two additional NATO straps with it, just to give you a lot of options. I feel like it's really cool. It definitely, and also Kyle from Straton, I had a question about the watch, got an immediate response from him pretty much when I sent him an email. I really appreciate that as well. Straton really impressed me just as a company as well through the experience with this watch, and makes it more likely that I will purchase something else from them down the road. And the last thing that I want to say is that, I don't want to make it sound like other watch companies don't pay attention to the design of their watches. Of course they do. But with the Straton Syncro, it feels like that every choice that was made about the watch was done very intentionally. And for some reason with this watch, that shines through in a way that I haven't really experienced yet with other watch companies. Be it from the checkered pattern around the racing bezel, to like the cutouts in the strap, to the way the subdials are framed, to the metal framing in the date window. I feel like that they really took their time and were very deliberate in choosing every part of this watch. It flows really well. It's just such a cool looking watch. Like I've had so much fun wearing this for the past week that it's just been a delight. It's been an absolute delight to have this watch, and it's already one of the favorites in my collection just far. So value for money. The Straton Syncro comes in at $499. That is the price you're going to pay in most instances. It is a smaller company. It's a micro brand. You don't get deep discounts when you buy it elsewhere. If you find a pre-owned one, you might be able to pick up a good deal. I actually saw one go for as cheap as $350 when I was researching this watch. So if you hunt for a good deal, you might be able to save a good price on it. But value for money for this watch is going to be it's going to differ from person to person. I do feel like that I've gotten great value. The watch is of good quality. The movement is excellent. Again, the mechanical chronograph feature is fantastic. You get a very professional premium experience with the watch. But for some folks, it's going to be difficult to get past the fact that you're paying that kind of money for what at the end of the day is a quartz watch. Now again, you're getting the mechanical chronograph movement, but if you just don't feel like it's worth it to spend that kind of money and end up with a quartz watch, well then it might be a little far for you. And if you're interested in the watch, you might want to see if you can find it pre-owned. For me though, I haven't had any qualms about that at all. So my final thoughts, if it hasn't been clear during the review portion, I absolutely adore this watch. I think it's fantastic. Now it is appealing to a very specific customer set. Like if you're looking for a very traditional, very classic chronograph style, this obviously isn't going to be the watch for you. For me, I'm a big fan of that 70s style chronograph aesthetic, and there's no better watch in my eyes that does it better than the Straton Syncro. Now I mentioned if you're buying this as a tool first, as a chronograph first, you're gonna want to look elsewhere. I think there are going to be better options that are just easier to read at a glance, especially that you can get that also have like the hybrid movement, so that you can get the automatic chronograph experience, I guess you could say. But for me, this is it, man. Like I said, it's hard to find a better chronograph. I love the style of the watch. I think the watch is excellent, and I just love it. I think it's awesome. Again, I've really enjoyed putting this on my wrist and wearing it for the week that I've had it so far. It's been excellent. Again, I don't see it going anywhere in my collection anytime soon. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a permanent resident because it's just so much fun to wear. And that is it. That is my review of the Straton Watch Company Syncro. If you enjoyed the review, please leave me a like below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I would really appreciate if you did that as well. That way you can and hit the bell icon when you do. That way you make sure you know whenever I post a new video. I thank you guys very much for watching this, and I will see you the next time.